So I previously visited Tower Bridge in London and got some good footage, but once I was back home and reviewing what I had, I thought that there was something missing and some different angles were needed. So a week later I returned to a different site a little bit further down the river. Again, all was going well until I tried to bring the drone home, and then, yes. Can you see what is wrong with this picture? That's right, no more Mini 3 Pro. It's gone. So what went wrong? Well, before I get into the detail of that, I want to take things back a little bit. If, like me, you're fairly new to flying drones, when you've gone out and bought your first drone, you most likely have got a DJI. Partly because there's not many other options out there, but they do also have a lot of very good features that make flying incredibly easy. And that includes their inbuilt maps and geofences to stop you flying places you shouldn't and keep you out of trouble. And as an example of that, here is a screen recording of me setting up my drone. So I use a Mini 3 Pro. You're probably familiar with this screen. I've blurred it out just while it's zoomed into my precise location, if you don't mind. But you'll notice that if you're inside a flight restriction zone close to an airport, for example, you will get a warning saying that you're in an authorization zone, you cannot fly, you have to unlock it, you physically have to tell the drone that you want to fly inside that area. It's a good way to make sure that you can't accidentally fly somewhere you're not allowed to. Similarly, if you're outside a zone, an authorization zone, somewhere you are allowed to fly, and you fly towards it, the drone will come to a stop and not enter that zone. So it's very good. It stops you entering places you shouldn't, but it's not perfect. If you follow any of the many Facebook groups or various forums, then you've probably heard the advice to ignore the DJI maps and actually use Drone Assist or Drone Scene, if you're in the UK, as being something that's more reliable. But why is that? So this is the DJI airport zone. It's broken down into several different areas that make up the zone around an airport, and you'll probably recognise this from when you view the maps in the DJI Fly app. But this is actually very different to what is produced by the CAA, the Civil Aviation Authority, which is what we're looking at here. Now it might only look like a minor difference, certainly from these views you may not see quite what the differences are. So if we look at an actual airport on the map, using one here which I'm familiar with close to me, first we're looking at what you would see on the DJI Fly app, and then if we switch over, this is what is provided by the NATS, National Air Traffic Service, and that uses the CAA method of defining flight restriction zones. Now the first thing you will notice is that the CAA zone is much simpler. It's just one area of red, do not fly here. Whereas the DJI zone is made up of several different coloured areas. That adds a little bit of confusion as to, can I fly here, can I not fly there, etc. It's not as clear as it could be. But if I just zoom in and we look at both maps together, you actually see that they aren't the same shape exactly. Where you can't fly according to DJI and where you can't fly according to the CAA is slightly different. If you were to fly in any of these marked up areas, you are actually inside the flight restriction zone of this particular airport. But according to the DJI map, you're outside the flight restriction zone and you haven't yet reached the geofence that would stop you entering. But technically you are breaking the law, and should for any reason that be found out, should there be an accident or whatever reason someone needs to check your flight logs in the future, you could potentially be opening yourself up to a fine or something like that. So that's just one example of why the DJI apps are considered to be inferior in as much as the information they provide isn't accurate. So the advice you'll hear is ditch the DJI maps, don't pay attention to those, fly using the drone assist or drone scene, which is entirely fair advice, and it's something I took on board early on. And if you do that, you will be flying legally and you have nothing to worry about. And that is exactly what happened on the day when I was flying by Tower Bridge and lost my drone. Yes, that's right. I was flying entirely legally, somewhere I was able and allowed to fly. And I had checked drone assist I was using at the time. I checked drone assist. Nothing was planned. It was a safe time to fly. So off I went. I didn't even think to look at the DJI map. The problem I had is when I came to return the drone to its home point, I encountered a geofence zone which I wasn't aware of. I didn't hit it on the way out. I didn't know it was there because I hadn't checked the DJI map. And as the drone was coming back to me, it hit that invisible wall and wouldn't go any further. Now, I was returning home because the battery in the drone was starting to get a little on the low side. I was over water, over the Thames. The drone stopped. It seemed to not be responding to anything. I hadn't noticed any warnings on the screen because, as we should be, I was looking at the drone, keeping a visual line of sight. So I missed some of those warnings. I didn't know immediately why my drone had stopped midair and wouldn't return. Knowing the battery was depleting, I think a little bit of panic started to set in. Wasn't thinking too rationally. Didn't even think to fly in another direction. I just kept trying to bring that drone home, and eventually it ran out of juice and safely auto landed and descended into the water, never to be seen again. So what was this geofenced area that I ran into on this fateful day? It's an area around the HMS President jetty. You can see here on the DJI map it's in blue, which means it's an authorization zone. It's geofenced. You cannot fly through that area unless you unlock it. But on drone assist, as you can see, it's only categorized as a ground hazard, which is why it got unnoticed to me on this flight. Since this incident, I have found or come across a number of other people that have run into similar issues in this exact same location. So it does appear to be a particularly risky place to fly if you're not aware of this zone. So if you do plan to come down to London and get some fantastic shots of the of London Bridge, then please just be very aware of this zone and make sure you fly well around it. As a more general advice, all I can really say is yes, use drone assist as the real guidance as to where you can and cannot fly, that or any maps that reference the CAA official zones. But don't ignore the DJI maps altogether. It is worth giving them a look over just to make sure there's no geo zones in the area you intend to fly. At worst, they could just be an annoyance that stop you getting the shot you want to get, but at worst, if you're over water with your battery running low like I was, it can end very badly. One thing I have to say after all of this is that I do need to give some props to DJI for their aftercare service. Their care refresh plan well and truly saved the day. I reported this as a flyaway incident, and within 4 days I had a new replacement drone and was up flying again. That was with a bank holiday weekend in between. And I'm now back out flying and working on my next video. So thank you for that, DJI. That's all I have to say. Thank you for listening.